Welcome to the WRAL Daily Download. I'm WRAL Investigative documentary reporter and producer Cristin Severance. Our recent WRAL documentary, Crisis Next Door, explores the impact on families of illicit fentanyl. My guest today is WRAL photojournalist Jay Jennings, who spoke with me about his work on this documentary and his deep personal connection to one of the families interviewed in the doc. Take a listen to my conversation with Jay. So, Jay, first off, how many documentaries have you done with WRAL?
Cristin, I think the total is now 115.
Wow.
It's kind of hard to believe.
So many stories.
So many, yeah.
I mean, when you think about your body of work and just all of these stories, I mean, what's that like? What is that like thinking back on really the privilege you've had?
Boy, you hit the privilege is the word. So many people have shared so many heartbreaking, delicate, personal stories with us over, I've been in the documentary unit since about 94, and it is a privilege to be able to share those stories with the viewers. And boy, I don't know that it got any more heartbreaking and personal than with this one.
I know it wasn't easy.
No.
And I know it's personal. And let's explain, we really do want to talk about this personal connection. And so for those who have not seen Crisis Next Door, you can see it right now on WRAL.com, or you can go to the WRAL documentary YouTube page and watch it. And in it, we try to explain what fentanyl is. We talked to experts, and we really told these heartbreaking stories of loss. We sat down with families, with parents, 3 sets of parents who all lost children, to fentanyl. And they were not easy interviews, Jay.
No, they were not. Not at all. To hear parents talk about the loss that they've suffered, and anyone, a loved one has lost someone to addiction, and in this case fentanyl, it was gut-wrenching.
It was. And for you personally, one family, you knew them.
Yes, Jeff and Lori Nash. We've known Jeff and Lori since before they were married, actually. Jeff was actually my son's second grade teacher in elementary school, and that's how we got to know him. Still remember meeting him on Meet the Teacher night.
Wow.
And his wife, his future wife, Lori, was also a teacher at that same school. And we've known them over the years, been close friends, went to church with them, and we were humbled whenever Jeff and Lori asked us to be godparents to their daughters, Amanda and Casey.
So you're listening to Jeff and Lori Nash explain what happened to their daughter, to 27-year-old Amanda, mm-hmm. who tragically died, from a fentanyl overdose. She went off to college in Boone. She was super bright, had this great childhood, was in a band, had 2 jobs. I mean, they both said they had no idea that she was involved in any of this. And, when Lori answered the door to 2 police officers standing there saying, is Amanda Nash your daughter? She says yes. And they said, she's no longer with us. And they later find out that it's a fentanyl overdose. I mean, so you are listening to this story as a photographer, but this is your goddaughter. Mm-hmm. What was that like?
It was awful. It was awful. I've cried during interviews before, but these were different tears this time around, because they were talking about somebody that I knew and loved, and these are words spoken by people that we love who are in pain, and it also was reminding me of the of Jeff calling and letting us know that Amanda had died, I was going through all that again, and it's just, I'm struggling to find the words now to describe what it was like to do that, because it's, it was hard, very hard.
I'll be back after the break with more from Jay Jennings. Back to my conversation with WRAL photojournalist Jay Jennings about the impact of fentanyl on families. I asked him what stories, like his goddaughter's, show about the crisis.
No family is immune. You are probably closer to opioid addiction than you ever dreamed that you would be. Mm-hmm. So many families are touched. I mean, it's just one or two steps away from you. It's a dad, it's a mom, it's a daughter, it's a cousin, it's a brother, it's a sister, it's a coworker. And again, it nobody is immune. And
it's in the cul-de-sac, right? It's in the cul-de-sac. It is the crisis next door.
I think that the title of it that we selected for the documentary really drives it home. This isn't, we always have this vision of, these drug addicts, somebody who's struggling with addiction, and they're on the streets, mm-hmm. Under a bridge somewhere, and this, as we were told during the by some of the experts, more overdoses now are happening in bedrooms. Mm-hmm. than anywhere else. If that doesn't say it's in the cul-de-sacs and in the suburbs, I'm not sure what does.
You're so right. And I think that kept coming up in all these interviews we did, whether it was your personal connection, whether it was the experts we interviewed, having their own personal stories. And, something we've had so many conversations about this. And I said, if you don't know someone struggling with addiction, you're so privileged. And then you said something to me. You said, well, if you don't know it, you're just not. You
just don't know it because it's going on.
You do know someone.
Yeah,
right?
You do know someone. You just don't know that you know someone.
Right. Like you haven't asked the question. Right. You're not kind of like looking maybe at your relationships close enough. So what... so you are retiring mm-hmm. after 43 years at mm-hmm. WRAL, yep. 25 years on the doc unit. This was your last full project. Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts on this being the last one?
I think it's, as hard as it was, I think it's appropriate that it's my last one. It's appropriate because it is so personal. And this is one I just couldn't just let slide and mail it in mm-hmm. and take the easy out on this one. I had to be 100% in. And as you and I talked, I kind of emptied myself on this one, emotionally, as much as anything else. It was hard, and I'm grateful that this is the story I got to tell, as much as it hurt.
And what would you like to say to Jeff and Lori?
Well, in our interview, Jeff talked about how he felt like he failed as a parent and as a dad, and I can certainly understand why he feels that way. But I will say, I would say to Jeff, as my friend, you didn't fail. You didn't fail at all. You were great parents. We watched you parent those girls, and you guys did an amazing job. The fact of the matter is that as parents, we're supposed to help our kids become great adults. And people still make bad choices, and some of those choices are fatal.
Sadly.
Very much.
Well, Jay, thank you so much for talking with us about this. We both knew that we would talk about your connection. I mean, when we were doing the documentary, we were trying to identify families to include in the documentary. And I know your son, Jason, said, well, what about Jeff and Lori Nash, right?
Yeah. And when he asked the question, I was like, oh, gosh, I've got to at least ask. I've never made that phone call before to somebody that, again, somebody I was so close to, somebody that I love so much that now I'm going to ask you to share the most devastating news that you've ever received, and not just with me, but with the viewers of WRAL. And that's... and I didn't know what he'd say. And he talked to Lori, and they agreed. And, what a privilege.
And we're so thankful and grateful for them to talk about this. And Jeff and Lori and the other families in the documentary, I mean, they really said that it's all they have left. I mean...
Exactly. Cristin, I want to ask you, because I don't know that there was anybody we've asked to be part of this program who had a story like this to tell who said no. Why do you think people were so ready and willing to share those stories?
I think they all said, look, nobody wants to revisit the worst day of their lives, but they all said it really was the only thing they had left, like talking about it, sharing this story, letting people know, pay attention, because if you don't, like, this could be the outcome.
This was the way that they could have some good come out of the tragedy. They could redeem this. This story could be redeemed in some way by sharing it with others. Right.
And I will say, you and I have talked about this a lot. I have been doing this for about 20 years, and I think half that time I've really subscribed to this notion of never read the comments. And I don't mean on all platforms, but specifically YouTube. I don't like getting into the comment section. I find the comments unhelpful, and at their worst, it's a very toxic place to be.
I agree. I've pretty much had the same policy.
Yes, like, just don't go in there because it's just not going to be helpful. Right. Well, I was wrong. Yeah. I was wrong on that, because if you go to our YouTube video of this, I mean, it's over 200,000.
Over 250,000, I think. It's close to that.
And views. And if you read the comments, these stories resonated. People, I mean, the vast majority of comments are insightful. They're inspiring. They're heartbreaking. And above all else, like, these stories resonated with people. And that is why Jeff and Lori shared their story. That is why the Stevensons, who lost two sons to this, that is why, Christy
Barker Cummings
talked about her 17-year-old son and shared this incredible story of forgiveness. And so, we did not want to mess this up, and we wanted to, just honor these victims. And I really think by the comments, I think, these parents, they did, they set out to help others, and I really think they are.
And the fact of the matter is, there were really a couple of major things at play. One was what you're talking about. This was their stories. While I had a connection, and there was a story kind of behind the story. The initial story of Christy and Jeff and Lori and Will and Diane, this was their stories. These stories belonged to them. And the other fact of the matter, from a television production standpoint, we have 24 minutes to get this done, and we saw no reason to sacrifice any of that to include this at this point.
Right. So we have talked about, we knew we were going to explore and talk about your connection to Amanda. we knew we were going to do it as a story. So, we did a follow-up story for the news. You can also find that on our website. But we just didn't want to put it in the documentary. And you felt strongly about that.
Very strongly.
And why?
It's not my story. This, in particular, when it comes to the Nashes and Amanda and Jeff and Lori and their daughter Casey, this is their story, not my story. I felt like I was in that format, in those 24 minutes. I would be injecting myself into the story that in a way that wasn't appropriate at the time. Again, I think there is a time and a place for it.
Right.
And I think we just had to find the time and a place for it.
Right. And I think this is it.
Yeah.
I think being able to explain that connection and to show it impacts everyone, even the man even the man behind the lens, right? Even the man trusted to tell this story. And it's a reminder that the people who do this, who tell the stories, are also people too. Right. Right. Anything else you want to share? No. Well, thank you so much. Thank you. And thank you for listening to this conversation. Again, you can find the story about Jay and his goddaughter, Amanda Nash, on WRAL.com. You can also find our latest documentary, Crisis Next Door, on WRAL.com or on the WRAL documentary YouTube page. Thank you so much.
Leave a comment and share this video with your friends. With daily uploads, there will always be a conversation.